What would you do if your 13-year-old daughter walked into a bank with her birthday money only to walk out in handcuffs, humiliated for simply being black? It was supposed to be a simple day. 13-year-old Ava Johnson stood on the sidewalk downtown, clutching her backpack and a crisp envelope filled with birthday money. The city buzzed around her, horns blaring, heels clicking on concrete, suited professionals rushing past without a second glance. But to Ava, this wasn't just any Tuesday. This was the day she would open her first checking account. To most adults, it might not seem like a big deal. But for Ava, it symbolized something far greater: independence. Responsibility. A step into the adult world. She had practiced what she would say, researched banks, rehearsed her walk through the glass doors in front of a mirror at home. This was her moment. She took a deep breath and walked into First National Bank. The lobby was everything she imagined: sleek marble floors, potted plants, cool air that smelled like printer toner and money. Ava's polished school uniform from Westfield Preparatory Academy stood out only slightly among the business suits and dress shirts. Her braid was neat, her shoes polished, and her heart racing. She was the daughter of Danielle Johnson, though almost no one knew what that truly meant. Ava believed her mom was just comfortable, not rich, not famous, just a hard-working woman with a decent job and high expectations. Danielle made sure of it. Ava took the city bus, did chores for her allowance, and shopped at ordinary stores like everyone else. She had no idea her mother was one of the most powerful financial executives in the country. And that ignorance had been intentional. Danielle had grown up in a world of power, privilege, and pressure. She knew what it meant to be judged for your wealth before your worth, and she refused to raise her daughter in that shadow. From the day Ava was born, Danielle had worked to create a life that felt normal, real. So Ava didn't know about the boardrooms, the corporate takeovers, the billions of dollars her family controlled behind closed doors. She didn't know that the very bank she was walking into was partially owned by her mother's empire. To Ava, she was just a teenage girl taking a bold first step. She approached the customer service desk with practiced confidence. The envelope in her hand held $800 birthday money from her grandmother, carefully saved over months. Her backpack carried another $1,200 in statements from her youth savings account, records of allowance and academic rewards. To Ava, it felt like a fortune. To the world she was about to encounter, it felt suspicious. She smiled brightly at the woman behind the counter, whose nameplate read Amber Collins. Ava didn't notice the subtle change in the woman's expression, the way her eyes narrowed, the flicker of surprise that shifted into skepticism. Ava was too focused, too hopeful. "Hi," Ava said, her voice polite and cheerful. "I'd like to open a checking account." "I have all the documents ready." Amber blinked, then sneered. "This is a real bank," she said coldly. "Not some community center for kids." Ava's smile faltered. She adjusted her backpack and tried to keep her voice steady. "I know. I'm 13 and I brought everything I need. My ID, my savings statements, and my school permission slip. This money is from my birthday." Amber cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Birthday money, huh? What did you do, steal it from someone's wallet at school? Or maybe it's drug money?" "That's usually how kids like you come in with stacks of cash." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She'd seen scenes like this in movies, on the news. She knew the phrase, "kids like you," but she'd never heard it directed at her. "I'm a student at Westfield Prep," Ava said, trying to stay calm. "My grandmother gave me this money." "I can show you the card she sent me." Amber rolled her eyes. "Sure you are. You probably stole that uniform too." Ava was stunned. In her world, her school, her home, she had always been treated with dignity. She'd been taught that if you followed the rules, worked hard, and stayed respectful, you'd be treated fairly. But now, standing in front of a stranger who had already decided what kind of girl she was, none of that seemed to matter. "I'll call my manager," Amber muttered, reaching for the phone. She knows how to deal with situations like this. Moments later, Sharon Blake, the branch manager, appeared. Middle-aged, stiff, and professional on the surface, but the look in her eyes when she saw Ava was chilling. Calculating, cold. "Shouldn't you be in school?" Sharon snapped, not even offering a greeting. "I have permission," Ava replied, pulling out her signed early release form. "My mum approved it. I planned this visit." Sharon barely looked at the paper. Her eyes were locked on the envelope Ava held. "And where exactly did you get that much cash, young lady?" Sharon asked, like a police officer interrogating a suspect. Ava's throat tightened. "It's birthday money, from my grandmother, and savings." "I can show you everything." But Sharon didn't want to see. The woman leaned in, eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe some teenager just walks in here with almost $2,000 like it's nothing?" Ava opened her backpack, trembling now, and pulled out the laminated card from her grandmother, her bank records, her school ID. She spread them out on the counter like evidence in a trial she didn't understand. Sharon scoffed. "Anyone can fake this stuff." Ava's voice cracked. "Please, I'm telling the truth." But Sharon had already picked up the phone. "I'm calling the police," she said, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "We have a minor here trying to deposit suspicious funds. Possible fraud." That was the moment Ava's world, the safe, ordered world her mother had built, began to crumble. She stood frozen, eyes filling with tears. The buzz of the bank faded. The marble floor beneath her felt cold, hard, unforgiving. All she wanted was to prove she was ready to grow up. Instead, she was being treated like a criminal. Ava Johnson stood frozen in front of the customer service counter, heart pounding. She could still hear the words echoing in her mind, "I'm calling the police." Her hands trembled as she tried to collect the documents she had so carefully prepared: her school ID, her laminated birth certificate, her savings statements, all now scattered across the marble counter like broken pieces of trust. Across from her, Sharon Blake hung up the phone with a satisfied click, as if she had just won some silent battle no one else could see. Ava looked around. People in the lobby had started to notice. A few turned their heads. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one stepped forward, no one said a word. And that silence was the loudest thing in the room. "Please," Ava whispered again, voice barely holding steady. "Can I just call my mom? She banks here too." "Her name is Danielle Johnson," Sharon smirked. "Nice try. You're not calling anyone. For all I know, you're part of a scam, probably working with adults, who sent you in here because a kid looks less suspicious." Ava blinked, stunned. She had never been accused of something so absurd. She had never felt so small. She had grown up believing that the world would meet her with fairness, that her hard work and good manners would be enough. But in this moment, it was becoming painfully clear that none of it mattered to Sharon Blake. The only thing that mattered to her was what Ava looked like. Across town, on the 42nd floor of a gleaming office building, Danielle Johnson was seated at the head of a polished conference table. A financial acquisition worth hundreds of millions of dollars was being finalized, her voice calm and strategic as she led the discussion. But in less than 10 minutes, her carefully compartmentalized world mother and mogul would collide. And back at the bank, Ava was still standing alone, now surrounded by suspicion and quiet judgment. She tried one more time. "I have my savings account statements from this bank. Look, my name's on them. You can check your system." But Sharon didn't bother. She didn't enter Ava's name. She didn't search for an account. She didn't even glance at the paperwork. Because in her mind, the verdict was already in. Just then, a uniformed security guard walked over, alerted by Sharon's call. He stood behind Ava, arms crossed, not saying a word, but his presence changed the atmosphere instantly. Ava's throat tightened. Was this really happening? It wasn't just disbelief that gripped her, it was a deep, rising confusion. How did a trip to the bank become something that felt so dangerous? Sharon leaned in, her voice colder than before. "You know what the problem is?" she said, eyes narrowing. "Girls like you don't just walk around with that kind of money. Not unless something shady's going on." Ava froze. "Girls like you." The phrase hit harder than anything else. It wasn't just rude, it wasn't just personal, it was coded. It was the voice of every stereotype Ava had only heard about finally spoken directly to her face. Her hands curled around the envelope of money not to protect it, but because it was the only thing grounding her in that moment. "I didn't do anything wrong," Ava said, louder this time. "This is my money. I just want to open an account." But Sharon had stopped listening a long time ago. Across the bank lobby, a woman in a red cardigan whispered to her husband, eyes darting toward the scene. A man in a business suit glanced at his phone, then at Ava, then back down again. No one said anything. No one intervened. And Ava learned, in real time, what millions of other young black Americans had experienced before her. That sometimes the system didn't even pretend to protect you. Her voice wavered. "You can call my mom." "She'll explain." But Sharon cut her off. "No, I'm done listening. If this really is your money, the police will figure it out." Ava's lips trembled. "Please, I'm scared. I didn't steal anything." "I don't understand why you're being so mean." Sharon folded her arms, unbothered. "Because this isn't a playground. This is a professional institution. And I've worked in banking for 20 years. I know when something doesn't smell right. And this?" She gestured toward Ava's envelope. "This is shady." In another part of the city, Danielle's phone vibrated on the table. It was the kind of emergency alert that bypassed all settings. A direct message from Ava, one that would override Do Not Disturb. She looked down at her screen. The text was short. "Mum, I'm at First National. They're calling the cops on me. They said I stole the money. I'm scared." Danielle's breath caught. Every person around the boardroom table paused as they watched the CEO's expression change, slowly, deliberately. First confusion, then understanding, and finally, something colder. Rage. Back at the bank, Ava was doing everything she could not to cry. She knew what it looked like if a black girl cried in public. It could be used against you. Labeled emotional, dramatic, manipulative. She had learned that from the news, from stories her friends told in whispers. So instead, she stood still, blinking back tears, trying to speak clearly. "I just want to go home." But it was too late. The police had already been dispatched. And Sharon Blake stood confidently behind her counter, believing she had done the right thing, that she had protected the bank from someone who didn't belong. She didn't realize that the girl she had just accused was the granddaughter of the man who built this very bank. She didn't know that Ava's mother was already on her way and that the world was about to turn upside down. The sirens didn't scream. There were no flashing lights, no crowds gathering outside. Just the subtle hush of dread that settled over First National Bank the moment two uniformed officers walked through the glass doors. Officer Grant Harrison, tall, square-jawed, and 15 years into the force, moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to being obeyed. His partner, Officer Grace Nolan, followed closely behind, scanning the room with a professional detachment that made her look more like airport security than someone sworn to protect and serve. The lobby grew still. Sharon Blake stood up straighter behind the customer service counter, practically glowing with self-importance. "There she is," she said, pointing across the lobby at Ava Johnson. "That's the one. I believe she's trying to deposit stolen money, possibly laundering it. She's been acting suspicious since she walked in." Officer Harrison gave Ava one long look. She was 13 years old, still in her school uniform, still standing beside the same pile of documents she had laid out with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She didn't look suspicious, she looked terrified, but Harrison's face didn't soften. He didn't crouch to her level. He didn't ask what was going on. He simply said, "Ma'am, we've got it from here." Sharon folded her arms with satisfaction. Ava tried to speak, her voice brittle from holding back tears. "Officers, please, I didn't steal anything. This is my money. I brought all my identification. I just wanted to open a checking account." Officer Nolan didn't even glance at the documents. She took a step closer. "What's your name?" "Ava Johnson," she whispered. "I'm a student at Westfield Prep." "My mum banks here. Her name is Danielle Johnson." Nolan raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "You said this money's yours?" "Yes. From my birthday and savings." "Uh-huh." Officer Harrison took a glance at the envelope on the counter. "That's a lot of cash for a kid." "You don't have a job. Where'd you really get it?" Ava's heart sank. It didn't matter what she said. Their tone had already changed. Their minds were already made up, just like Sharon's had been. She tried again, her voice cracking. "I can show you everything. My savings account, my school ID." "The birthday card from my grandma." "We get calls like this all the time," Harrison interrupted, cutting her off. "Kids like this, caught up in all kinds of schemes. Sometimes they're being used. Sometimes they're trying to look innocent. Either way, they always have a story. Kids like this." There it was again, the phrase that sliced through her like a knife. Not kids her age, not students, not young lady. No kids like this. Like her blackness was the first clue that something must be wrong. "Turn around," Officer Nolan said flatly. "Place your hands behind your back." Ava blinked. "What? You're being detained for suspected fraud and theft." "I didn't do anything," she cried, voice finally breaking. "Please just check the documents. Ask my mom." She can explain, but the cuffs were already out. Cold steel met her wrists. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the lobby like a gunshot. Customers looked up from their seats. An elderly woman near the windows covered her mouth. A man in a suit pulled out his phone, recording silently. One woman shook her head and whispered, "This is wrong." But no one said anything aloud. No one stepped in. Ava's cheeks were wet now. She couldn't stop the tears. They spilled freely, a mix of confusion, fear, humiliation. "Please," she whispered again. "Please don't take me. I didn't do anything." But Officer Harrison was already guiding her toward the exit. "Let's go." Behind them, Sharon Blake stood smugly, arms crossed like a guardian of order. To her, this wasn't an overreaction. It was a job well done. She didn't know that just 20 minutes ago a text had been sent. A single message that was now racing through cell towers, past city blocks and skyscrapers, headed straight for a boardroom high above downtown. Inside that boardroom, Danielle Johnson was standing. She wasn't shouting. She didn't slam her hands on the table. But everyone at the conference could feel the shift. The air changed. The energy in the room tightened, like a wire pulled too far. "Gentlemen," she said in a tone that chilled the spine, "this meeting is over." The 5 executives seated around her, all seasoned veterans of mergers, market crashes, and billion-dollar deals, fell into a stunned silence as Danielle grabbed her phone and car keys. "Is everything all right?" asked Thomas Chen, her vice president. Danielle turned slowly. Someone had just arrested her daughter, and that someone had no idea who they were dealing with. Downstairs in the bank parking lot, a police cruiser sat idling. Ava, now in the back seat, stared blankly through the window. She couldn't speak. She couldn't believe this was happening. The cuffs had cut into her wrists. Her backpack sat on the front passenger seat, left half-zipped and ransacked. Her envelope of money had been taken as evidence. Every adult she had trusted the banker, the police had ignored her. She wasn't a person to them. She was a profile. A problem. And yet, the real storm hadn't even arrived yet. Because Danielle Johnson, billionaire CEO, daughter of the Rodriguez dynasty, and one of the most powerful financial figures in the country, was now en route. Her Bentley glided through city streets like a phantom. Her voice calm but deadly over the phone. To my legal team, meet me at First National. To Richard, bring security. And Logan, I want a direct line to the chairman of the board. In exactly 23 minutes, the same lobby where Ava was handcuffed would be filled with lawyers, executives, and cameras. And Sharon Blake's career, it was already over. She just didn't know it yet. 23 minutes. That's how long it took for the entire world inside First National Bank to shift on its axis. Outside, the quiet rumble of a sleek black Bentley broke the rhythm of downtown traffic. The car slid to a stop at the curb with the grace of something that didn't just belong, it commanded. The doors opened. Danielle Johnson stepped out, tailored navy suit, Italian leather heels. No jewelry except for a platinum watch and her daughter's tiny birthstone pendant barely visible beneath her blouse. Her face was unreadable. Behind her, Logan Pierce, one of the most feared attorneys in the financial sector, followed. Then came Richard Cole, her head of private security, a former police captain, with eyes that scanned every corner like a military drone. Inside the bank, chatter faded. Customers instinctively moved aside. Employees paused mid-sentence. Something was coming. Something big. Sharon Blake stood behind the counter, basking in the glow of what she believed had been a well-handled incident. Her face wore the smug satisfaction of someone who expected a pat on the back. She didn't look up until she heard the click of heels on marble, slow, deliberate, almost theatrical. Then her eyes met Danielle's, and she had no idea who she was looking at, not yet. "Can I help you?" Sharon said, in the same patronizing tone she had used with Ava just minutes earlier. Danielle didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulled out a single, heavy-stock business card with gold lettering, and placed it on the counter like a verdict. "I'm Danielle Johnson," she said quietly, "and you just handcuffed my daughter." The silence was immediate and total. Sharon blinked, then forced a laugh. "Wait, your daughter? You must be mistaken." "That girl was trying to deposit stolen cash. I followed protocol. The police already—" Danielle cut her off without raising her voice. "You didn't follow protocol," she said. "You didn't check her documents. You didn't look up her name in your system. You didn't even give her a phone call." She leaned forward, voice low and lethal. "You saw a young black girl with money, and you assumed she was a criminal." Sharon's smile wavered. Her eyes darted to the gold lettering on the business card. Danielle Johnson, CEO, Rodriguez Financial Holdings, primary shareholder, First National Bank. The blood drained from her face. I didn't realize." "That's the problem," Danielle snapped, her calm cracking like ice under pressure. "You didn't realize who she was, so you treated her like she didn't matter." By now, every employee in the building had gone silent. Tellers froze. Customers stopped pretending to look away. A few pulled out their phones to record. Sharon stammered, "Look, I just thought—" "No," Danielle said, turning to face the growing audience. "You didn't think. You profiled. You humiliated. And you endangered a child, my child, without facts, without due diligence, and without conscience." She turned to Richard. "Where is she now?" "She's being processed at juvenile holding," he replied. "We're pulling her out now." "Logan's already filed the injunction." Sharon gasped. "You're suing?" Danielle looked at her, eyes like steel. "I'm not just suing," she said. "I'm reviewing every decision you've made at this bank, every client you've profiled, every minority you've doubted, every report you've filed, and when I'm done—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Because Sharon Blake already knew. Outside, police radios crackled with new instructions. Inside, phones buzzed as the board of directors began receiving calls from the Rodriguez legal team. A storm had arrived, not the kind with rain and thunder, the kind that wore high heels and knew the value of silence. And for the first time in her career, Sharon Blake didn't feel in control. She felt small. powerless, exposed. As Danielle turned to leave the counter, she looked over her shoulder once. "Tell me something, Mrs. Blake," she said, voice soft. "How much money would a white girl need to bring in before you'd accuse her of stealing it?" Sharon didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. Danielle Johnson didn't speak as the Bentley raced through the city streets. Her phone buzzed non-stop in her hand, texts and updates flashing across the screen. Logan Pierce was coordinating with the police chief. Richard Cole was tracking Ava's exact location. The Rodriguez legal team was preparing emergency filings, but all Danielle could think about was her daughter in handcuffs. Her brilliant, kind 13-year-old daughter who had done nothing wrong, except walk into a bank while being black. They reached the juvenile center in under 10 minutes. Danielle didn't wait for a staff escort. She walked through the front doors with such authority that even the officers on duty instinctively stepped aside. Ava sat alone on a bench in the intake area, eyes red, wrists still sore from the cuffs. When she saw her mother, her lips quivered. "Mom," she whispered. Danielle crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her daughter into her arms. "I've got you," she murmured. "You're safe now." Ava shook against her. "I didn't do anything. I just wanted to open a bank account." Danielle didn't cry. She couldn't. Not yet. There was still work to do. Back in the car, Danielle held her daughter's hand as they drove through the city. Ava stared out the window, silent. She wasn't ready to talk. And Danielle knew this moment had changed her. She had spent 13 years building a world where Ava could grow up safe, shielded from racism, from power games, from the ugliness Danielle herself had known as a child. She had taught Ava about kindness, humility, hard work. But she hadn't taught her about the danger of being underestimated or hated because of her skin. And that was a mistake she would not repeat. Danielle pulled the Bentley to the side of a quiet park. No cameras. No lawyers, no guards, just mother and daughter. "Ava," she said softly, "I need to tell you the truth. About our family. About me." Ava looked at her with tired, confused eyes. "I thought you just worked at a bank." Danielle smiled sadly. "I don't just work there. I own it. Well, most of it. Rodriguez Financial Holdings has controlled First National Bank for over 80 years. It was started by your great-grandfather, a black man who was denied service at a white-owned bank and decided to build his own." Ava blinked. "But then why don't we live in a mansion? Why do I take the bus?" "Because I didn't want you to grow up entitled. I wanted you to understand what it feels like to earn things, to be seen for who you are, not for our money." Danielle's voice hardened. "But now I realize that shield I built for you, it wasn't strong enough. I thought I was protecting you from the world, but I was only delaying the moment it would try to crush you." She turned to Ava. "And now we fight back." That night, Danielle didn't sleep. She sat at her desk at home, phone pressed to her ear, laptop open, surrounded by case files, HR reports, security footage, and banking policy handbooks. By midnight, her team had filed a formal civil rights complaint against Sharon Blake and First National Bank. By 2 a.m., a private investigator was compiling a report on every instance Sharon had reported suspicious behavior over the past 5 years. 97% of them were black or Latino customers. By dawn, Danielle had ordered a full audit of all disciplinary actions and denied services in the bank's past decade across every branch. She wasn't just coming for the manager. She was coming for the system that allowed this to happen. At 7:30 a.m., Danielle stood in front of the mirror and adjusted her blazer. It was time, not just for justice, but for reckoning. She turned to Ava, who stood in the doorway, still shaken but dressed for school. "Do I have to go today?" Ava asked quietly. Danielle knelt beside her. "No," she said. But you're going to want to. Why? Because today, your name is going to mean something different. She placed a small pin on Ava's collar, a golden R for Rodriguez. Today, they'll learn who you are. And more importantly, who they should never underestimate again. At 9 a.m., the doors to First National Bank's executive offices opened, not with drama, not with shouting, just the soft sound of Italian leather shoes, briefcases snapping open, and power sliding into place. Danielle Johnson had arrived. She wasn't there to scream. She wasn't there to threaten. She was there to pull every string from the inside out calmly, surgically, and without mercy. The same system that tried to humiliate her daughter, she was going to rewire it. Step 1. Exposure. Logan Pierce walked into the bank's compliance office carrying 2 thick binders. Inside, security footage, internal emails, and a list of complaints that had gone unanswered for years, most dismissed quietly, never escalated. Names, faces, patterns. Sharon Blake wasn't the only one who had profiled customers, but she had been the boldest, and now the most visible. With Logan's report in hand, Danielle ordered the entire employee history of First National Bank to be reviewed. Every flagged transaction, every denied account, every customer turned away. Within 24 hours, Danielle's team uncovered a 10-year pattern of systemic bias that had been quietly buried by middle management, some of whom had even received bonuses for fraud prevention. No more. Step 2. Accountability. Danielle called a private emergency board meeting. She didn't need approval to do it. As majority shareholder, she could summon the board anytime she wanted. And this time, she wanted blood. Charles Whitmore, the longtime chairman, sat across from her, his jaw tight. He had known Danielle since she was a teenager, brilliant, ruthless when needed, and dead serious about integrity. "I've already fired Sharon Blake," he said, trying to preempt the storm. Danielle didn't blink. "And the rest?" "The rest," Danielle leaned forward, eyes locked. "I want full performance audits on every branch manager. I want anonymous surveys from employees. I want mystery shoppers sent to 10 branches across the city. And I want any manager with more than 2 internal complaints gone by Friday." Whitmore swallowed. This wasn't just personal. It was structural, and Danielle was burning it all down. Step 3. Reform. While legal teams worked behind the scenes, Danielle launched a public initiative under the Rodriguez financial banner, Justice in Banking. It wasn't PR, it was war. A press release went out within hours, written not in legalese but in plain human terms. "If my daughter, a straight-A student, well-dressed, well-prepared, can be accused of being a criminal for having cash, imagine what's happening to the children who don't have our resources." Danielle didn't hide behind lawyers or generic apologies. She named the problem. Profiling. Prejudice. Presumption of guilt. And she declared, "It ends here." By the end of the week, every single employee of First National Bank, from interns to senior VPs, received notice. Mandatory 40-hour bias and ethics training. No employee may report a customer under 18 without documentation and dual approval. All branches to designate a youth services specialist. But that was just internal. Externally, Danielle made sure other banks were watching. She sat down for a 60-minute interview, not as a CEO, but as a mother. She told Ava's story not with anger, but with unwavering clarity. Millions watched, and in households across the country, parents whispered to each other, "That could have been our daughter." Meanwhile, Sharon Blake's downfall spread like wildfire. Her photo was shared in news reports, LinkedIn posts, HR compliance groups. Her story, once buried behind polite bank walls, became a case study in corporate failure. She had gone from branch manager to nationwide warning sign, a living example of what happens when prejudice is protected until it isn't. But through all of it, Danielle kept moving like a current underwater quiet, strong, impossible to stop. Because this wasn't revenge. This was a rebalancing. She didn't want just one apology. She wanted a system to be rebuilt so that the next little girl who walked into a bank wouldn't need her mother to own the place just to be treated fairly. And that was only the beginning. The next morning, First National Bank's lobby was unrecognizable. Camera crews waited outside. Local news anchors rehearsed their lines. Customers hesitated before walking in, unsure if they were stepping into a bank or the epicenter of a reckoning. Inside, tension hung in the air like thick smoke. Every teller, every assistant manager, every security guard, every VP, they were all gathered near the customer service counter where it had all started. Sharon Blake's desk was now empty, but her ghost still haunted the space. No one said it out loud, but they all knew. The CEO was coming. And not just any CEO, Danielle Johnson, the woman whose name now filled headlines, group chats, and legal memos across the country. When she walked in, the marble floor beneath her heels seemed to fall silent. Ava was with her. Not hiding behind her mother, not scared. She stood tall, wearing her school uniform like a badge of honor. Whispers rippled across the room. That's the girl. That's her. Danielle didn't speak immediately. She stood for a moment in front of Sharon's old counter, the same one where her daughter had been reduced to tears. Then she turned to face the crowd and spoke not as an executive, but as a mother. My daughter walked into this bank with money she earned, documents she prepared, and a dream of independence. Her voice was clear, measured. Devastating. She left in handcuffs. A hush swept across the floor. No one verified her ID. No one checked the system to see that she had an existing savings account. No one allowed her a phone call. Because to this bank, a young black girl with money in her hands was automatically a suspect. No one moved. No one looked away. Danielle raised a gold business card between two fingers and held it up. I'm Danielle Johnson, CEO of Rodriguez Financial Holdings, majority shareholder of this institution. She stepped forward. My grandfather founded the first black-owned credit union in this state after being denied a home loan by men who said people like him couldn't be trusted. Her eyes scanned the room. And now, generations later, his great-granddaughter walks into a bank that bears our family's investment and is treated like a criminal. Someone near the back of the room swallowed audibly. Danielle continued, voice calm but ice-cold. Let me be very clear. You didn't just disrespect my daughter. You disrespected my bloodline, my legacy, my money. A security guard, one who had stood silently during Ava's arrest, looked down at his shoes. Do you know how many of you cashed paychecks last week? Danielle asked. A beat. Those checks cleared because of my family. She pointed to the Rodriguez crest on her lapel. You work for us, not the other way around. A man stepped forward, Charles Whitmore, the board chairman. He looked older, smaller. Danielle, he began, on behalf of the board, I deeply... No, she said. This isn't the part where you apologize, she turned to her daughter. This is the part where you listen. Ava stepped forward. She held up a folded permission slip, the same one she had brought the day she was arrested. This was signed by my school counselor and my mom, she said. It gave me permission to leave school early so I could open my first bank account. She unfolded the laminated birthday card from her grandmother. This came with the money I brought. But no one read it. Then she pulled out her savings account statement stamped and issued by the bank itself. I had more documentation than most adults, but no one believed me. Her voice was quiet but firm. I wasn't just disrespected, I was erased. Danielle stepped beside her again. And now, she said, we write every child like her back into the story. She looked around. This is the moment you all remember that customers are not profiles, children are not criminals, and black skin is not a red flag. The silence that followed was complete. But it wasn't fear. It was awakening. And for the first time, in the very place where Ava had been handcuffed like a suspect, she was seen clearly, powerfully, for who she truly was. Not a threat, not a statistic, but a girl who stood her ground, and changed the ground beneath her. By the end of the week, First National Bank was no longer just a bank. It was a headline, a case study, a cautionary tale. Danielle Johnson's speech, raw, elegant, and unflinching, had gone viral. Major outlets ran with it. She owns the bank, and they still called her daughter a thief. 13-year-old arrested for opening a bank account. CEO mother responds with action. But the most powerful story came not from journalists. It came from the footage. 2 days after Danielle's appearance, First National's board released the lobby security tapes. They didn't have a choice. Too many eyes were watching. The video showed Ava entering the bank, calm and polite. It showed her laying out her documents, her school ID, her savings records. It showed Sharon Blake waving them away, smirking, leaning over the phone as she called the police. It showed the handcuffs. The footage ran on national television. Churches showed it during Sunday sermons. High schools played it during social justice workshops. Parents played it for their kids, then asked, "What would you have done?" And more importantly, kids started sharing their own stories. In New Jersey, a black teenager spoke out about being denied service at his local credit union for having 2 new $20 bills. In Texas, a Latina girl posted a video saying a teller refused to believe her scholarship check was real. In Chicago, a boy talked about how his mother, a nurse, always sent him to the ATM so no one would assume she was stealing. Danielle's team compiled thousands of these reports. And what they found was devastating. This wasn't an isolated event. It was a blueprint, repeated, tolerated, normalized. At First National, internal investigations began. Emails, complaints, customer service calls. A pattern emerged. Over 85% of all suspicious cash incidents involved people of color. White minors were almost never flagged, even when depositing more than Ava had. Several black and Latino employees had filed complaints about racially biased protocols, only to have their concerns resolved informally or ignored. HR had signed off on all of it. Now HR was under review too. Meanwhile, the 2 arresting officers, Grant Harrison and Grace Nolan, were placed on administrative leave. Their body cam footage was pulled. Their reports were compared to dozens of previous arrests. What emerged wasn't just troubling, it was undeniable. Officer Harrison had arrested black minors at triple the rate of his white colleagues in similar neighborhoods. Officer Nolan had used force against youth of color 5 times more often than against white youth. Neither had reviewed Ava's documents before cuffing her. The police department issued a public statement. "We failed to uphold our duty to protect and serve with fairness. We are reviewing protocol and conducting full disciplinary review." But for many in the community, it wasn't enough. Because if Ava hadn't been the daughter of a billionaire, what would have happened? Danielle didn't stop with First National. She contacted federal regulators. She met with congressional aides behind closed doors. She hosted roundtables with advocacy groups. And then she launched a new initiative, Financial Justice for All, a nonprofit backed by the Rodriguez Foundation dedicated to educating youth about their financial rights, training bank employees in bias and equity, providing legal support for families who experience discrimination, auditing banks for systemic inequality. It wasn't charity, it was accountability. First National Bank, under Danielle's direction, became the first major bank in the country to require mandatory racial bias training every 6 months for all employees. New rules were implemented. Minors could not be reported to law enforcement without approval from 2 managers and documented policy violations. Suspicious transaction protocols had to include objective criteria, not assumptions based on race or age. A youth services specialist was placed in every branch trained to work with young customers, especially first-timers like Ava. Was it enough? No, but it was a start. And for the first time, families across the country felt like someone powerful was fighting for them, not against them. As Danielle stood before a room of CEOs months later, she held up the same gold business card she once laid on Sharon's desk. "This," she said, "doesn't mean anything if your people don't feel safe walking through the front door." She looked around the room, full of polished suits and cautious nods. "And if my daughter can be treated like a suspect with money in her hand and a straight A record in her bag, then none of your customers are safe from your bias." The room went quiet, not in fear, in realization. The system had been exposed, and it would never look the same again. Ava Johnson didn't speak much the week after the arrest. She went to school. She came home. She stared at her bedroom ceiling at night, trying to make sense of how one simple trip to the bank had shattered her understanding of the world. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the realization that no matter how polite she was, how prepared, how educated, some people had already decided who she was before she even opened her mouth. And now, the whole world knew. Her face was on TV. Her name trended online. Kids whispered in the hallway at school, not out of malice, but curiosity. Adults offered polite sympathy, and teachers called her brave, but Ava didn't feel brave. She felt broken. Until one day she came downstairs and saw her mother reviewing a letter. It was handwritten, on wrinkled, lined paper. A 12-year-old girl from Atlanta had sent it. "Dear Ava, I'm sorry that happened to you. Something similar happened to my brother, but no one believed us. You make me feel like maybe people will listen now. I'm proud of you. Tamara." Ava read it twice, then 3 more times, and something shifted inside her. That afternoon, she asked her mother if she could attend a Financial Justice for All event, not as a guest, but as a speaker. Danielle paused. "Are you sure?" Ava nodded. "I want to tell my story. Not for me. For all the Tamaras." She started small at a middle school in Queens. The gym was full of kids who had never walked into a bank, who thought checking accounts were for other people, who assumed financial language wasn't meant for them. Ava stood at the microphone, palms sweating, heart pounding. And then she spoke. "My name is Ava Johnson. I was arrested for trying to open a checking account. I did everything right, and still got treated like I didn't belong. But I do belong, and so do you." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't pity, it was power. A row of girls near the front wiped their eyes. A boy in the back whispered to his friend, "She's like us." And from that day forward, Ava wasn't just Danielle Johnson's daughter. She was a voice. She began traveling across the state, speaking at schools, youth centers, community banks. Not every speech was polished. Not every sentence came out perfect. But Ava told the truth. She talked about fear, about doubt, about how even being wealthy didn't shield her from being profiled, and how many kids didn't even have that. She taught young people how to advocate for themselves in financial spaces, how to file a complaint if they were mistreated, how to not stay silent when they felt erased. She wasn't preaching. She was passing the mic, and the world started listening. National youth organizations invited her to speak. Teen Vogue published an op-ed titled "Ava Johnson and the Fight for Financial Equality." She was interviewed on NPR, her voice calm, thoughtful, unwavering. But the most important moment was when a 12-year-old boy named Miles walked up to her after a school event in Detroit. He held out a crumpled envelope. "It's $50, he said. "From my birthday. I want to open a checking account. Can you show me how?" Ava smiled and sat down on the gym floor with him. "Absolutely," she said. "Let's start with your ID." That night, she told her mom, "I think I know what I want to do." Danielle raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "I want to help kids feel powerful. I want to make sure no one gets handcuffed for trying to grow up." Danielle didn't say anything at first. She just pulled her daughter into a hug. You already are. By the end of the year, over 100,000 students across the country had attended workshops run by Financial Justice for All. Ava's story became the opening video at every session, not because she was a victim, but because she was living proof of what could happen when a child who had been silenced found her voice and used it to lift up everyone else. She was once the girl who had been told, "Kids like you don't belong here." Now, she was the girl who made sure they did. 6 months later, Ava Johnson walked through the glass doors of First National Bank. Same lobby, same marble floor, same counter, the one where she had once stood, heart racing, trying to prove she was enough. But this time, things were different. This time, the world knew her name. The bank had changed. A polished new sign behind the counter read, Youth Financial Services, Ava Johnson Welcome Center. Every customer under 18 was now guided by a dedicated team member trained not just in financial policy, but in dignity. Gone were the whispered assumptions. Gone were the security guards who stared without speaking. Instead, there was a new kind of energy, one that said, "We see you. You belong here." Ava was greeted at the front by Melanie, a young black banker in her late 20s, with box braids, a warm smile, and a badge that read, Youth Specialist. "Welcome back, Ava," Melanie said, extending a hand. "I've read about you. It's an honor." Ava shook her hand firmly. "Thanks." "I'm here to open an account." Melanie laughed softly. "Well, let's make sure no one gets arrested this time." Ava grinned. "Yeah," she said. "Let's." The process took under 10 minutes. Simple, respectful, efficient, just like it always should have been. Melanie walked Ava through her new checking and savings accounts, handed her a colorful welcome packet made specifically for teens, and introduced her to the bank's new mobile app designed with accessible features for first-time users. "I wish this had existed 6 months ago," Ava said, flipping through the pages. Melanie nodded. "It does now because of you." As Ava turned to leave, she stopped in the center of the lobby. She looked around, not with bitterness, but with quiet reflection. There had been a time when this place felt like a battlefield. Now, it felt like proof. Proof that voices matter, that change is possible, that systems can evolve when someone brave enough demands they do. Outside the bank, reporters waited not because Ava was scandalous news, but because she had become a symbol of progress. One stepped forward gently. "Ava, do you have a message for other kids who've been through something like what happened to you?" Ava paused, then said, "Don't shrink yourself just because the world makes you feel small. Know your worth. Speak your truth. And remember, you don't have to be rich or powerful to demand respect. But if you ever find yourself in a room where no one will listen, make sure the next time you own the room." Across the country, her words echoed in classrooms, youth centers, and living rooms. Banks re-examined their youth protocols. Police departments added training around handling minors and implicit bias. And the story of Ava Johnson was taught in financial education programs not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. At home that night, Ava sat with her mum on the porch, legs curled beneath her, sipping cocoa. The sky above them was quiet. "So," Danielle asked gently, "how did it feel to go back?" Ava smiled. "Like I reclaimed something." Danielle nodded. "You know, I built a foundation," she said. "But you built a movement." Ava leaned her head on her mom's shoulder. "I didn't do it alone." "No," Danielle said. "But you did it first." The world hadn't just changed Ava. Ava had changed the world. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth, grace, and the kind of quiet strength that doesn't ask permission. It rewrites the rules. Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions start with a little girl holding an envelope of birthday money who refuses to be invisible. In a world where bias can cloud both truth and dignity, Ava Johnson's story reminds us that justice doesn't arrive on its own. It must be demanded. She was just 13, walking into a bank with birthday money and hope. But instead of being seen as a young customer, she was treated as a threat, judged not by her actions but by her appearance. Thanks to her courage and her mother's quiet strength, a system that often looks away was forced to take notice. The greatest lesson? No one is ever too small to spark real change. Whether you're a child trying to be heard or an elder who's witnessed decades of struggle, your voice still matters. As older generations, we carry not only wisdom, but also the duty to pass down the values of fairness, kindness, and the courage to speak up. We must remind the young and ourselves that silence protects no one. It is truth, not convenience, that brings healing. So when we witness injustice, whether in a bank lobby or around a family table, let's not stay quiet, because it's silence, not difference, that allows prejudice to live on.